models and raise prices due to President Trump's 25% tariff on aluminum imports.
European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders.
Trade tensions between the United States and Canada have reached a critical juncture. On May 30th, 2025, the Trump administration stunned observers by announcing a dramatic increase in tariffs on steel and aluminum, doubling them to a staggering 50%. The move set off alarm bells in Ottawa, which had previously hinted at using its vast oil exports as leverage. But now, Canada is opting for a different weapon, the automotive industry. Historically, disputes between the two nations are centered around steel, aluminum, and oil, key pillars of their economic partnership. However, the sudden tariff hike from Washington has escalated the crisis, prompting Canada to consider far more forceful measures. Canada is no minor player in this arena. It ranks among the top 5 global producers of aluminum and is consistently within the top 10 for steel. The trade volume of just these two commodities between the U.S. and Canada hovers around $35 billion annually. Notably, Canada is the largest supplier of both steel and aluminum to the United States. For years, this cross-border trade has been relatively stable. However, with Trump's protectionist approach, the relationship has become strained. The initial 25% tariffs were met with concern, but dialogue continued. Now, with a sudden jump to 50%, Ottawa's patience appears to be wearing thin. Canadian officials have not minced words. MP Terry Sheehan, representing Sault Ste. Marie, a community deeply tied to steel production, called the tariffs arbitrary, illegal, and unjustified, warning of damage not only to Canada, but to the entire North American economic fabric. Minister of Trade Dominic LeBlanc echoed these sentiments, asserting, "We can give far more than the United States can take from us." The Canadian government has made it clear retaliation is imminent, and this time, it's the auto sector that is squarely in their sights. Why automotive retaliation matters. Canada's auto exports to the U.S. are valued between $60 and $65 billion, almost double the volume of steel and aluminum trade. The sector represents a deeply integrated cross-border supply chain, born out of NAFTA and continued under the USMCA. Parts and vehicles cross the border multiple times before completion. A car engine may be built in Ontario, the chassis in Michigan, and the finishing touches added back in Canada, before finally hitting U.S. showrooms. Major U.S. car manufacturers, such as Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis rely heavily on their Canadian operations. Japanese automakers like Toyota and Honda also use Canada as a strategic production hub for the American market. With the 50% steel and aluminum tariffs, Canadian-made inputs for U.S. vehicle assembly have become significantly more expensive. This raises the cost of production for U.S. automakers, which will ultimately lead to higher prices for consumers. A pickup truck built in Michigan could easily contain steel from Canada, meaning these tariffs will directly erode profit margins and increase end-user prices. If Canada retaliates by restricting exports or imposing its own tariffs on automotive goods, the impact could be severe. U.S. assembly lines could grind to a halt due to missing parts, and showrooms might run short of popular models. The resulting price spikes and shortages would likely cause political fallout for President Trump. But this is a double-edged sword. Any major disruption in automotive trade would also hurt Canada. Many of the plants in Canada are owned by American companies, and any slowdown would result in job losses and economic hardship at home. However, the Carney administration appears willing to accept that risk, at least to some extent, believing that strategic pressure in this critical sector may force Washington back to the negotiating table. The oil card, still on the table. Canada had previously signaled that it might use oil exports as leverage. As the single largest supplier of crude oil to U.S., with a trade value around $100 billion, Canada could, in theory, cause severe disruptions to U.S. refineries and fuel supplies. A move like that would send gasoline prices soaring and create a political nightmare for the White House. Still, such a step would also impact Canadian producers and revenue, making it a high-risk option. Compared to oil, the automotive sector offers a more targeted retaliation strategy. Given its tight integration with the U.S. economy, Any disruption here would reverberate quickly and painfully across American industries and consumers. A breach of the USMCA? Ottawa argues that these tariffs not only threaten economic balance, but also violate the spirit of a USMCA agreement. Under USMCA rules, vehicles must have 75% of their content produced within North America to avoid tariffs. Canada's steel and aluminum are integral to meeting these requirements. If the U.S. penalizes Canadian materials, it risks undermining its own trade agreement. A similar Canadian countermeasure, imposing automotive tariffs, could likewise breach the USMCA, potentially pushing the agreement to the brink of collapse. Yet Canadian officials seem willing to escalate the conflict if that's what it takes to defend their industries and sovereignty. The fallout: a trade war or a strategic reset. American automakers are already lobbying against the tariffs, warning of disastrous consequences if steel and aluminum prices soar. Their concerns are well-founded. A full-scale trade war could paralyze North American supply chains, turning a previously win-win situation into a lose-lose scenario. What remains uncertain is how far Canada is willing to go. Will it cut auto exports altogether, impose 25 to 50% tariffs of its own, or simply use these threats as bargaining chips in high-stakes negotiations? There is also the question of global alternatives. Canada has been exploring ways to reroute its oil and gas exports to Asia and could seek new partnerships in the automotive sector with Europe or Mexico. However, turning away from the U.S., its largest and most profitable market, would be a significant economic gamble. The road ahead, the coming weeks and months, will reveal the direction of this conflict. Will diplomacy prevail, or will both countries dig in their heels, leading to a full-blown trade war? One thing is certain: Canada is no longer playing defense. By threatening the U.S. with automotive retaliation, it has signaled its readiness to stand firm. Whether the strategy compels the U.S. to reconsider or further entrenches both sides remains to be seen. As always, those who stay informed will navigate these turbulent waters better than those caught unprepared. We'll continue to monitor this developing story closely. What's your take on this crisis? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates.